what somebody else thinks about you is none of your business.
Welcome to our BrainFood Book Club. Our BrainFood Book Club is basically a monthly virtual book club that we created in order to be able to read business books and discuss. I often find that when I read business books, I have no one to talk about it with. So I found a couple of other people that are in the similar boat. So I thought we would put together some of the highlights of things that we kind of discovered along the way when we're reading the book. Now, I have to be honest, I can't air all of the book club because we tend to go off topic. We tend to discuss a lot of things in our personal lives and we end up laughing a lot. It's a lot of fun. So anyways, we put together a few highlights of some discoveries that we made, the value that we took from the book, and honestly, feel free to join in. The book club is virtual, it's free, it's fun, it's a great way to learn from others and be inspired. And honestly, we meet once a month, 45 minutes, virtually during lunch, and it's a great way to network and build connections. So check it out. I can't wait to hear your thoughts.
So how are you, darling?
I'm good. How you doing? You look lovely.
I'm so much better. Because I just got back from London on Wednesday afternoon, and then on Thursday I was so sick.
Oh. So your trip to England was a good success?
So good. It's the first intensive I've done. So that was interesting and fun and amazing all in one. Like, it's a professional athlete, and so it was a really, really good, just amazing. And it was nice to kind of be together so that we could kind of, like, we went for a walk. We just kind of, like, we talked, we chilled, like, it was a good energy and results phenomenal. And then the training I did, amazing. So, and it's funny because I met, like, all these people that are my Facebook friends at this training. One guy that I interviewed on my podcast, I was like, Nick. And he's like, Jessie Lynn. So yeah, I know, it was totally cool.
I love athletes. They have such drive, motivation. Like, speaking of motivation, yeah, they have really drive and motivation, right? Like,
until they don't, but they're human. Like, and that's just the thing, is that kind of when you get out of, like, that's what I love this book. Like, it's one of these things. State of mind is everything. And when you kind of, I think, like, because we're human, we get into this kind of thing where we get caught up, and when you're in a low state, right? When you're down, you see a snapshot of things. You don't see the full picture. And then if you get stuck in that, then then everything starts to look dark,
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's hilarious. How did you come across this book, out of curiosity?
This is the understanding that I teach. This is the whole understanding that I coach from.
Yeah, well, I thought it was really interesting because it said, one of the quotes I was reading, it said 81% think state of mind is really important. And I was like, 81%, that's huge.
Right? Yeah.
Like,
this woman is amazing. Like, she's really, like, so most of the people in my community, all of us, whether we are coaching athletes in business, personal, challenges, children, the training that I just did still comes from this understanding, and it's working with troubled youth. I am working with a group in the UK on resilient young minds, and it's all from state of mind, And so when you address that, magic happens.
I thought the book was actually pretty good. I was actually surprised. It's an easy read. Like, it was just the stories were really good and everything else. Hey, Jules.
Hi. I finally made it in.
Julie.
I think I got caught up in the first third of the book, because they go into so much detail talking about the differences in thought and mind and beliefs and really breaking it down.
Yeah, no, I thought it was really neat because it was funny because in the beginning it said, about how thoughts create the world. So yesterday I actually went to the Ellen show that was here in Toronto, and, it was really funny because she was talking about, I mean, when she had her own sitcom, Ellen or whatever it is, I didn't realize that she had lost everything when she came out, like literally lost everything. And then a friend of hers had passed away and so on. And she was talking about how she had this vision about that she wanted to get on Johnny Carson's show and be the first female comedian that got to sit with Johnny Carson. So way back when Johnny Carson was a big, huge deal. Like, you know, so it was just neat when I was reading that when it said thoughts create the world. I was thinking about her example about saying that she had this vision, you know, that she wanted to do whatever it was, to sit with them. And she did, right? And I was like, that is so true, right? Like our thoughts really do create everything.
Yeah. Well, because we live in a reality. Like you can't have an experience without having a thought, you know? And that's the amazing thing. What I say to people is there's a magic in it, because it's one of these things where if you think somebody else creates your feelings, you give away your power.
Yeah.
You know? And it's amazing, like when you do work with, like when I was working with some troubled youth, when they see, okay, so there's this really cool Rebels for Peace in Chicago where one solution, again with this understanding, has brought together like two of the rival gangs in South Side of Chicago, which is a huge feat. Younger people, and sat them down, and what they're now at the point where they've created this Rebels for Peace because they realize they're tired of you killed my person, so now I'm going to kill your person, you know?
Yeah.
It's just the cycle that just keeps going on and on and on. And it's one of these things that if you realize that nobody can jump inside your head and tell you how to think and how to feel. And it's like how one day we can feel okay about traffic and the next day the very same traffic really pisses us off. You know?
That's highly relatable.
Yeah, right? But it's true, and it just depends on kind of where we're at. Like I always tell an example when on Halloween a couple of years ago, I was trying to rush to get Finley out for Halloween. And my mom was living with us, and my mom doesn't eat vegetables. Finley doesn't eat potatoes. So I'm trying to like cook 3 different meals. And my friend is texting to say, when are you bringing Finley over? If he wants to go out, he's got to be here by 6. And all of a sudden, Finley spilt milk, a bag of milk. And I yelled at him. And I don't really yell at him that much. So he got upset. He came upstairs. And I was cleaning up the milk. And then I started to laugh because I realized literally it was just spilt milk. You know, but I had gotten, and I wasn't yelling at him for spilling the milk. I was yelling at him because I had this constant story going on in my head about, oh my God, like this is another thing that I have to do, and everything is hard, and now I have to cook 3 meals, and the more I engaged, the bigger it got, you know? And that's what I was reacting to.
That's cute. It's funny because my niece, this is a couple of months ago, actually maybe even almost a year ago, she actually spilt milk, and my sister and I just started laughing. We had the opposite reaction that you did. We just started laughing, but Mia got so upset. She started getting mad at us because she spilled milk, and we didn't think it was such a big deal. And she was, but it was so weird that her reaction was, you know, why are we angry? What was going on? And she was angry and disappointed that she had spilt milk. Meanwhile, we were laughing so hard. And we're like, oh, go figure, right? And so we're cleaning it up. And my sister said it perfectly to Mia. She says, dude, we just clean it up and get you a new cup. And it was just like this look of her face of such confusion of, what? Just like that? But she was really disappointed in herself for spilling the milk.
And it literally is just spilled milk.
It's just spilled milk.
Yeah.
I laugh so hard at that.
It's interesting, like there's so many different perspectives, and it is about that story that we build around it and where you get down to the root of it. Because like there was an example in the book talking exactly about that, where like this manager was like, no, there's no dedication in this person and no passion to, work because they come in 9 to 5. but I work, early mornings, late nights. Like, that's what dedication's all about. But then it got down to the root of it was because that's how his dad was. And that's how he was taught and brought up to say, like, if you don't work hard and concentrate completely on work, then you're not being productive. So it's like,
so
how
funny.
do you change that story, right? Or even find out what that story is for some people.
Well, when I work with businesses now, it's such a beautiful thing when they see that. And it's like, I remember as a manager having, judgments about some of my staff. And then it's like, now I look and I'm like, when you can see, like, so somebody could show up for 4 hours and do more work than somebody who's there for 12,
Mm-hmm.
No, it's just a matter of productivity. I'm with you on that. It's neat because it's that when she was talking about, it's just thoughts that we subscribe to. You could just hit the unsubscribe button.
Yeah, that was cute. That was very cute.
Yeah. And you don't have to do anything with it. There's the other thing I love about it is because just because you're having the thought, that doesn't mean you have to like have an act on it. And this is a great one again for people who are in conflict. It's like, okay, so you're having the thought, have it, and then just let it go. Because if you just don't engage with it, a fresh one will come along.
Mm-hmm. It made me think a lot more. When she was talking about the different minds, how the mind, thought, and consciousness, but then the impersonal mind, the absolute and big mind. But the impersonal mind was that universal mind that says it was constant and unchangeable. I was actually thinking about that because I remember doing one of those leadership courses way back when, and they talk about your natural DNA. And, there's some things about you that are always going to be there regardless of, things like your values, that DNA. There's some inherent ones, because they talk about, whether you have the power or the influence or all those different, those things. And I was like, that is actually quite true because, when it unleashed, what it unleashed for me was that I like to have, impact and influence. And I guess it's because of my consulting DNA and the way I think. I just want to try things and just do it and see if it works. Or, I don't want to have FOMO. I kind of want to be part of just do whatever, right? Like, but it's kind of like when I look back at all the different things about all the jobs and even volunteer roles and all those things, it does come back to that whole universal mind that it is, these are real natural DNA type of triggers that we all have.
Mm-hmm. I heard that and read that somewhere too. I can't remember. I've been just soaking all of this kind of reading in and podcasts and everything else, you name it. And it does talk about that being, not just part of your DNA, but also part of your family upbringing and even your namesake. Like, say your last name's Shoemaker. It's ingrained in your, like you said, your DNA, your blood, your family bloodlines. It's all there and you almost can't get rid of it. Unless you really, like, it takes a lot. You can't really, of course you can change it, but it just takes that much more effort to flip that switch.
Yeah, no, I get that. It was funny because it was, because like, again, when I was looking, I was really reading a lot more of it this morning because I was like, I better finish this up. And because that Ellen is still really fresh in my brain from yesterday, she was talking about she hasn't done stand-up comedy for 15 years. And, she's had this is like 16 episodes of her other Ellen show, right? Oh. So she hasn't been on the circuit for a long time. And people are like, what? You're going to go back to that? And she was talking about how nervous she was. So even if something that she kind of, was a natural, born into it, but being out of practice for so long, she was so nervous about it. She hadn't exercised that kind of skill in a long time. And then so she basically she was talking about how she went to a small comedy show and surprised them. And it was like 100 people. And she was talking about she knew that there were hardcore people that actually read newspapers, not digitally, the paper, hardcore people. And to test out whether her material was really good or not. And so it turned out it was really good. So she's like, okay, great. I got 20 minutes of material and need another 40 more minutes. But he tested early. So I think he kind of went back to that idea that the thoughts and the feelings and the behavior and that result. But if you do it in smaller chunks to test things out, it kind of reinforces, okay, you're on the right track or not, as opposed to building it so big and waiting for the finished huge outcome. And then waiting for that surprise, and it builds all that anxiety, that if you kind of just do it in smaller chunks, you might get there a little bit more faster, but two, you'll keep building kind of that, new mindset of new thinking of, okay, yes, I'm on, it's working, or it's not working, and let me tweak it now and try different things.
If we take that back just a couple of notches to how does she know if it's right or not? And it's like with a feeling, right? If it feels right.
Yeah.
And that's at the core of this is we know intuitively we're equipped with this amazing system within. And it blows my mind myself for majority of my life, how I've talked myself out of, like, I will look for something everywhere else but within, and it's there. Like, we know intuitively when something feels right, and when we're off track.
Why don't we ever trust our instincts fast enough?
I don't know. Like, honestly, like, it's one of these things where it's like, it's, and what was it? I was listening to it was a podcast or reading a book where they said that there's part of the prefrontal cortex that when you're in an extremely dangerous situation that shuts down so that you don't do the thinking and you act naturally from your wisdom. And I was like, oh my God, that's fascinating.
Do you remember way back when, now this is back about 15 years ago, there was that book called The Gift of Fear?
Oh, Gavin de Becker. Yeah.
I haven't heard of it.
Yeah. Amazing. He's got a couple of books, actually. Yeah. I have that book somewhere. Yeah.
So Julie, basically the whole thing about The Gift of Fear was about your instinct that actually triggers at that critical point. And you've just become so much more courageous because, whatever it is. But they talk about that, us being skeptical or whatever it is, it actually means that we're seeing something that doesn't feel right. Yes. Right? You're right. It goes back to that feel. So like, I think one of the, I can't remember the story, but I think one of them was about either a grocery store or a convenience store, and somebody was going to walk into it or whatever and really didn't feel comfortable. Yeah. And decided not to, and thank goodness the person didn't, because it turned out to be like a robbery or something that actually was about to happen. That's Spidey sense.
It's funny because I just watched when I was over in the UK with my cousin, we watched Dirty John. Now, I had listened to that podcast, but what blew me away now, kind of looking at it, and it's funny, you can always say this looking from somebody else's experience, is, have you seen it?
No, I haven't seen it. It's on my playlist.
Oh, okay.
John, it's a really, it's actually a really famous podcast. It's one of the top podcasts that's been around for a long time. Huh. And there's a couple of podcasts. It's on
Real Crime Profile that they had originally done it. And it's just about this guy who kind of preys on older, wealthier women, so I won't ruin the whole thing for you, but I'll just say that in the beginning, the very first episode, he goes on a date with her. But first of all, shows up at the door, and the daughter immediately feels something that's not right. But so they go on this date, they go back to her place, and they're kind of fooling around a bit. And then she goes to the bathroom, and she comes out of the bathroom, and he's in her bedroom. And it doesn't feel right for her. And she's like, oh, and he's lying down on her bed. And she's like, oh, I thought we could just stay in the living room. And he didn't. And right there, it's so funny because there's we get all these warning signs or these little nudges from the universe to say this is worth paying attention to. And she didn't. It was fascinating.
Well, now I'm going to have to kind of binge watch that.
Well, I thought it was because I had listened to the podcast quite a while ago on Real Crime Profile, and then I was like, oh my God, okay. Interesting when it comes to the whole internet dating thing. But yeah, so it was just kind of funny. But there's so many examples in life where we do this. Even it's so I'll say to Finley, what feels right in your body when you're making a decision about how you're interacting with somebody. If it's, there was a kid at school that he was struggling with, and he was coming home and he was complaining about him, and I said, tell me something good about him. And he did. And I said, which feels better in your body? Because I want to point him to that wisdom and start getting him fine-tuned into it now versus later in life.
It's funny that you mentioned that. I just did an episode last week about grateful and what that grateful means. And I didn't realize all the benefits about being grateful. Honestly, I thought gratitude journals were a joke. I've never really kind of got into that type of stuff. It's too fluffy for me. But after I did some research about, gratefulness and gratitude, there's so many benefits beyond belief, and really it's about looking forward. But what threw me for a loop was that it's actually reduces stress, internal stress, by 23% by being a bit more grateful. And the reason why, when you mentioned about your son's friend or that person, what do you like about them? What are you grateful about with them? Yeah. It just changes so much about and seeing things a lot more differently and clearly. Because we're always looking for the, okay, what don't we see about the person, and what is it that, whatever. But we forget about the other things that we do see or we do get.
And we've had this conversation, like, why is it that we always go to judgment and criticism as our first go-to? As a society, we can be pretty harsh.
Oh, yeah.
Extremely.
And it's funny because this morning he was talking about his grade 2 teacher, and he's like, because he didn't bond with her. But he's like, do you know the one thing I liked about her is that they were doing some exercise and she loved Harry Potter. And so she brought Harry Potter into it. And I was like, that's really cool. I said, there's usually something in everybody,
Mm-hmm.
But we're so quick to jump on the judgment bus and just roll with that. And it's funny, actually.
I'm trying to decide if I really do quickly jump on the judgment bus. For me, either like somebody or I don't like somebody. I'm kind of that person. Like, when I meet somebody and I'm like, oh, there's something interesting about you that I kind of want to know more about, then I'm kind of hooked, right? Like, you kind of tagged me in. I'm like, oh, I'm intrigued. I want to know more. But then there's people that I just don't connect with or just not interested in, because I'm like, oh, no. So maybe I am being judgmental by just having them as, yes or no. Because it's about time. How much time do you invest in somebody to kind of, because when you first meet somebody, it's like I think they put their best effort in up front, right? And then it goes downhill from there, or whatever it goes. So if they're showing me this side up front, I'm like, yeah, I'm not interested. I'm out. I don't know. Is it me being judgment, or is it me being that I've got a little bit more experience, that I kind of know a little bit more?
Well,
I don't know.
I think it's about knowing yourself too.
Yeah.
Well said, Jules.
An example of that. So I was dealing with somebody at the bank over my dad's stuff, and they transferred me to a new guy, and I didn't like right off. He just rubbed me the wrong way a couple of times, and so I remember I was complaining to my brother, saying, "Oh, I got to deal with him again," And then I had to deal with him for another. I went in for something else with my mom. And he apologized, and he's like, I'm really, really sorry. And I saw a different side of him. And any time that we kind of dislike, kind of come up with any idea about something, we're always looking with a filter, with our personal lens on, which comes back to the kind of in the book. But it's I think just knowing that it can change from moment to moment,
Oh yeah. I mean, I think that's part of forgiveness too. It's just a couple weeks ago, I had this checkout lady or whatever, and she was grumpy as hell. Anyways, but I actually appreciated the fact that she was there so early, and it was awful weather. And I said, oh gosh, it must have been so hard for you to get to work today. And she's like, oh, and then cars splashed me, and I didn't have an extra change. I'm like, that is awful. And I think, part of it is us having a little bit of empathy for the other person on the side, up a little bit up front, kind of, that they may be having a rough day, but I try to give a grain of salt. But then when they don't bite and they're not willing to, I'm like, okay, forget it. I've tried. But some people really do soften, they just kind of like, oh, yeah, that's not exactly the way I wanted to project it, or whatever it is. If someone took away if you had $18,000 something and someone stole $10 from you, would you throw away the rest of the $18,000? So, and I was like, what? So I had to read more because they had me. And then it's basically, well, if someone takes your 10 seconds away from you of negativity, are you going to really throw it the rest of your day?
Right.
And let it impact you? And I was like, that is such a good way of looking at it, eh? Like, such a good way. Yeah, their 10 seconds of grumpiness can't impact me. That's their problem, not mine. Like, that's their self-projection. That's their stuff. That's not my stuff. I have to find it.
It's kind of interesting, though, that I find myself doing this a lot of the time. It's like, as much as we're selfish people, that selfishness, this is going to sound somewhat philosophical and tongue-tied, that selfishness almost takes in that someone else's anger and you personalize it.
Right. Yes.
To be yourself.
Yeah. It's theirs.
Yeah. It's so interesting how that happens.
Well, there's this, I love this quote, and it's like, what somebody else thinks about you is none of your business. and it goes both ways, right? Because we can show up, like say you showed up that day at the supermarket stuff, and you had grumpy goggles on, and you were like, oh, just hurry up and get me through, like, and it's just like, but you had a different lens on at that moment, right? So it's same thing, and it's like, we get so caught up in all our stuff. Like, what I think of this person really doesn't matter because it's my own personal thought, and I've created a story around it. That's all that it is.
Mm-hmm.
And when we don't engage with it and just let it go, I just find life just flows. I have no, like, I don't carry weight on my shoulders anymore. And that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I think it was that day. The reason why I didn't feed into her negativity was because I was actually really grateful that I didn't have to travel to work in that horrible weather.
Yeah.
So I had an appreciation for that day for all those people that had to travel into work because it was awful. Like, it was one of those, I can't remember what day it was. It was one of those days where you can't go outside. Honestly, you're bare skin in 10 seconds. It was going to like probably fall off. Like, it was that kind of cold day. So I really was just so appreciative that she was actually I think it was at the grocery store that she was there, because I was able to pick up a couple of things. And I think it was because I was just feeling, and it goes back to that word grateful. Like, I really wish I had thought more about gratefulness. Because last week it was kind of like a real big week for me. And when I did this whole thing about this research about grateful, and I thought, if people really, not being like, I'm grateful for my friends and family, that we're all grateful for, but more specific small things about being really grateful for. Like, I'm really grateful that the two of you showed up today so we could chat about this and connect. And I was looking forward to seeing the two of you and others, just to catch up on things and whatever. So I'm really grateful for that. I was really grateful that I actually had hot water in my shower. Didn't have it yesterday, small things, it just reminds us there are other stuff that we just don't see. I think we're also too hard on ourselves too, right? Like, we always think about all the stuff we didn't do or we failed to accomplish or what others perceive of us and blah, blah, blah. It's tiring, man. It's really tiring.
Talking about that to-do list and how it becomes that cycle. And you just said it there, something about, we're so hard on ourselves. We think we have to do this massive list of tasks to feel accomplished. But what does that really give you?
Yeah.
Well, and what does it give you, Julie? And who makes that list?
Right. It's like we're doing it to ourselves.
Create the list. Yeah. So we create the list. And then when we don't, do everything on that list, then we get mad at ourselves. It's like
self-punishing.
It's funny that you said that. Is because a couple weeks ago, about 3 weeks ago, my cousin from England called me. She's about 20 years old. And she was talking about, she's so overwhelmed she just finished university and she's in her first job. And your first job, you want to do it all, right? Like, you want to be eager, and she's just feeling really overwhelmed, like to the burnout. And I'm like, oh, jeepers. And so she was asking about, how do you manage your time and blah, blah, blah. You've got this podcast, you got this, you got your book, you got all this stuff going on. How do you do it? So I said, well, there's tons of different techniques out there. And she's like, no, I get that. I've read about those techniques, but how do you do it? And I'm like, it took me a while to actually hear what she was saying. And she wanted to really hear how I prioritize things. And so she has a baseline to try a process out and then make it her own. You know, because everyone talks about all these things, but no one actually says, here's step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of how I do a bunch of things and prioritize. So I actually wrote a huge blog about this is how I actually prioritize things, so she could actually have a baseline and then go, okay, yes, I followed it. Now I could tweak and go, okay, this doesn't work for me, or, you know, you like pen and paper, I need something digital, you know, whatever it is. But then she can make it her own, because that's what she was saying, is just the overwhelm of, like, you know, I was telling her, like, I only actually do 3 things a day. Like, on my to-do list, I have 3 things for work stuff that I'm going to do and 1 for personal. I don't do more than that, because anything more than that I know is a waste, and I feel like a failure at the end of the day.
But so many people will look at that and say to you, like, only 3 things? Like, you're so lazy. Like, how could that be? Right?
It's so true. That's what she said. I said, but then it gives me time for other stuff that comes up that I can deal with as well. And I don't feel like I'm not accomplishing it, because I break my stuff up into such smaller goals and achievements that they actually all fit into a larger one. So if I don't finish one today, I understand the downstream impact, because it's going to impact a couple of other things, but it's okay. I can do it tomorrow if I really can't get to it, because I've broken it into such small tasks. So it doesn't feel like, oh my gosh, I'm not making movement or momentum, you know, like, yeah, that's why I do only 3. Because I used to write down, like, Jules, you remember last year, I was working 24 hours a day on my,
my God,
these things, and always going to bed miserable and feeling grumpy. And when I was writing in my journal, I would talk about all the stuff I didn't do, and I would go to bed feeling like a failure. And what did I say? No, because I'm thinking about that.
But it's, again, comes back to society, right? It's like, so what society's painting is the picture, and we're going in that direction, especially with the digital age, of, like, you know, you got to get more stuff done because you're more accessible and connected, and you have 24/7 service, you know, to the internet to talk to anybody around the world. And there's that pressure. And then, you know, going into the rabbit hole of, you know, social media and all those things, and you're doing that whole comparison thing. And that, you know, starts to cloud your mind about what success is about.
Yeah,
so it's a lot of pressure on people, especially even like your cousin at 20. I can only imagine.
Yeah, but it's even like friends, like they'll send me a WhatsApp and then they expect me to respond within, like, you know, 20 minutes. And I'm like, honestly, you're asking about, it's Monday, you're asking plans for the weekend. I haven't thought that far ahead. I will get there. But yeah, you're right, Jules. I think we have become a lot more impatient. You know, and I think that's where back in that book about that quiet mind is undervalued, that she starts talking about that. I think that's where it really plays into it. You know, the whole thing about, you know, well, as you know, like I've been learning how to meditate. Like I've been using that Muse thing, which honestly has been a game changer for me. Like I went to the hairdressers about, I think it was 6-7 weeks ago, and, you know, they're usually chatty Cathy, and I actually just said, I'm just going to close my eyes, you know? And he said, what? I go, I'm not sleeping. I have so much stuff to do. I just can't think right now. And so he said, great, then I'll cut your hair better with you not talking. So, you know.
So both of you benefited.
Totally. And then afterwards he said, oh, so you were meditating? I said, no, I don't think I was meditating. He goes, well, you weren't sleeping? I said, no. And I go, I just wasn't thinking about anything. He goes, girl, that was meditation. I'm like, oh my God, I'm now doing meditation finally on my own without Muse. But it did help.
Anytime you can let your mind settle. Often when I'm working with kids, we make glitter jars. And it's the same thing as a snow globe. And it's one of these things where they love it. But it's like when you shake a snow globe, it's like that's what our thoughts are like when they're busy and stuff like that. We don't have the clarity. So when you let your mind settle and you see like the snow globe, when the snow settles, you see it. It's clear. And kids get this so much quicker than adults do. But that's the time when you're optimal for creativity, for making, you know, good decisions and all that stuff. It's like when we let our minds just quiet. And in this busy world of constantly on everything, people just don't stop. and just be, That's why often when I'm working with clients, we do go for a walk in nature, because it's like, there's an energy to that. That's amazing.
It's kind of scary too, because back to Julie's earlier point about all the stuff that we've got, like more busyness, more noise, more expectations. I mean, we've got heightened expectations for ourselves too. It's kind of scary how the loneliness epidemic is hitting at a higher rate than any time before. So you're thinking that in a connected world, we're more connected, we have more ways to communicate with people around the world and do other stuff. People are more lonely now than they ever have been, and there's no age group for this. That's the scarier part. Like in the UK, they created a national council of loneliness to kind of take a look at it. It's not just elder. It's about younger generations. We've got the friendship bench here at schools that they're trying to roll out, because if kids don't have somebody to play with or eat lunch with, it's not an age thing. It really is hitting every demographic under the sun.
People are not having conversations anymore. They text, they think that, oh, okay, I'm going to check in. I'll check in with my mom today. I'll send her a text. I'll check in with my friend. I'm going to send a text. So there's a lot of personal connection that gets lost in all of that.
Mm-hmm.
I love technology and all that. Sorry, Julie.
No, sorry. No, I was going to say, it's funny when we're texting each other that you don't even use full words anymore. You use emojis and acronyms, and you're supposed to deduce what that means, right?
Well, when I was over in London, Finley had sent me a message, and it was like, "See you, Tom." And I was like, "What is he saying, Tom? Did he like?" And I was like, "Oh, tomorrow." Yeah.
My one cousin Sabrina, I think she must be, I don't even know how old she is, must be 17, 18. I honestly, every time she messages me, I have zero clue. And she's actually sending a couple sentences. I have zero clue what any of the words mean. That's how old I am now.
Yeah. I have to Google half the little abbreviations of stuff. What does that mean? It's so funny though, all these things. And it's I was talking to another parent this weekend, even at Finley school, they're using Chromebook so much more that her son was having trouble writing a paragraph, a couple of sentences. He had one going straight, one going one horizontal. And
no.
Well, and I mean, I had a problem when they got rid of cursive writing in schools, but then with so much more technology, and then I read an interesting article even about kind of the radiation and all that stuff. You think of in the Wi-Fi, kids constantly on things, and it's there's so many things when you stop and think about it.
By the way, the cursive writing, I went to the dollar store and they actually have books on teaching kids how to do cursive writing, because my niece wanted to learn how to write, because when she makes cards and stuff, she wanted to kind of almost take it to Julie's calligraphy world, but she wanted to, that it looked a little beautiful.
Yeah. It's, but not only it does, and I love it, but it also activates a different part of your brain.
Oh, does it?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So this was one of the reasons that I had a problem with them when they kind of were eliminating it. And it's okay, so then there's cursive writing, and then if they're constantly on computers, then when are they actually, when are they exercising these parts of the brain? That's just not.
When I find that article or video that I just listened to the exact same thing Jessie lit about that activating different parts and how important it is, and what kids are actually lacking in development without the handwriting. I'll send it over.
Oh, please do.
To you guys.
Please do. Yeah. It's IDK. I'm kind of stuck on that one right now.
I know.
Well, I remember first when LOL came out, and I thought that people were sending me lots of love, and I was like, "Oh, that's so sweet." And for the longest time, I couldn't believe how many people were sending me love. But I was like all of a sudden, it was just one of these things, and I was like, "Oh my God!" I'm just surrounded by love, and I wasn't.
Yeah, it was
people are laughing with you, not at you.
Yeah.
Lots of love. How are we ever going to be able to learn to talk to and communicate with each other?
Oh my goodness.
I was watching on YouTube. I don't know what I was watching. But anyways, Mr. Bean came on. And I was thinking about Mr. Bean. Do you guys remember Mr. Bean?
Oh, I love that show.
Oh, yeah. But he never spoke. Everything was through body language, right?
Yeah.
Right? Like, talk about it. A really strong message there. Like, that show was so universally accepted because people understood the body language and facial expressions and whatever else. Like, I still can't get over actually how ahead of time I was actually thinking about stuff or like, body language and facial expressions. And I think we forget those cues give us away a lot more often than...
So much information in that. So the training that I was on, one of the modules on it was accepting differences and diversity. And a video they showed was of people sitting across from each other and just for 4 minutes, just making eye contact.
Mm.
Oh, man, I don't think there was a dry eye in the room. Like you see these people, and it's funny how some people are like awkward and would start talking, or like like kind of making art, kind of looking away. But amazing video. But then that's just it. It's like that. There's that non-verbal side of life that's poof.
The quote was, if you had $86,400 and someone stole $10, would you throw away the other $86,390,000 or move on and just live? Right. So that's what you're going to do. Move on and live. You have 86,400 seconds in each day, and don't let someone's negative 10 seconds run into the remaining 86,390. I thought that was really kind of impressive about that 10 seconds, eh?
It's the same thing. There's an exercise to do with thought. Same thing. And it's like one of these things, if thoughts were money, would we just kind of scatter them so much? Like they say that we have 60 to 80,000 thoughts a day. And would we kind of be a little bit more selective with what we engaged with if there was a value to it like that from a financial perspective?
So thanks for checking out our banter and our aha moments and being a bit of a fly on the wall. And again, you don't need to read the book to join the BrainFood Book Club. We honestly just meet once a month, 45 minutes. It's virtually during lunch hour, and it's a great way to connect with others and talk and learn and be inspired and even get energized. I often find after every one of these sessions we have, I am so pumped and I've got new ideas for my business, for my career, all these different things. So again, feel free to join. It's free. It's fun. It's a great way to share. I've added the link inside of the notes here. And honestly, feel free to share with others that might just need a little extra juice in their mojo. Anyways, can't wait to hear your feedback. Cheers.